Hello, friends. Welcome to Escambia Citizens Watch Live once again. I'm John Singley, your host. Today we're going to continue our series on the Mayor's Transition Report. And we've been talking to individual team members, and now we've reached the neighborhoods department of the report, and we're pleased to have in the studio with us today to talk about his work on this neighborhood section is the Reverend Dr. Isaac Williams of Pensacola. Isaac, welcome.
Thank you, John, for inviting me.
You are a member of the community for some time now, but for those of us who haven't had the pleasure of meeting you, share with us a little bit about yourself and your family.
Yes, thank you, John. My name is Isaac Williams. I'm the senior pastor here in Pensacola of Greater True Vine Baptist Church, 130 North Pace Boulevard. I've been there about 15 years. I'm married to a young lady by the name of Janie Williams, and we have two wonderful daughters, Remi and Janna. Remi is a doctor of occupational therapy in Houston, and Remi, she's a director of human resources for a medical center there. We're very proud of them. They are doing well, and so that's about the gist of who I am.
That's quite a wonderful family you have here, very accomplished, and your work with the ministry has been well recognized, I suppose, because the mayor has reached out to you to be a member of his team. Can you tell us a little bit about how all that came to be?
Yes, I'm not exactly sure, John, how I became a member of the transition team. I think it may have a little to do with the fact that when Mayor Robinson was a candidate, he stopped by the church one day with a brochure, and he asked me would I read it and consider having a conversation with him, and so I did. I read the brochure, and I called him back, and I met with him, and when I met with him, he shared his vision for his campaign, and I said to him I was somewhat reluctant to have this meeting with you because I didn't like the vote that you made on the closure of Ralston Road. And he said to me, if I could have done that over, I would, but when I gave my word to the school that I would support it, it was on the docket and there was no opposition. And once I give my word, I honor my word. And that really touched me because I respect a person who will honor his word. And so I said to Mayor Robinson, I said, I can work with you, I can support you because I can respect a person when they're strong, even if they're wrong, rather than they're weak and washy. And he laughed a little about that. And so I think that may have had a little something to do with it.
Well, you found yourself on the transition team. It got cranked up and working during the winter and gave its final report to the mayor here in the community here maybe 2 months ago, or almost 3 months ago now, as it turns out. But your particular area of the neighborhoods is one that I thought was very interesting because I remember the mayor, after he was elected, there was some sort of forum or meeting here in town, and the mayor was presiding or attending, and some of the people in there talked about how best to get to understand the neighborhoods. The mayor said he wanted to be more inclusive and bring the neighborhoods into decision making and participation in city government. And there was a gentleman stood up in the back of the audience, and he said, "Mr. Mayor, this isn't a hard one to figure out. My neighborhood association's been doing great work for about 50 years, and we've never had a mayor come out to see what we were doing. So I would invite you to come out, take a look, and form your own opinion." So I know that in your pillar, your area of neighborhoods, you had a big scope. What is it, 81 different neighborhoods and homeowners groups around town?
It's 81 different homeowners association and neighborhood association here in Pensacola.
So the scope of your research and your report was wide-ranging. Is there anything that you know that can explain why this was such a wide subject? That was a lot of moving parts in this, having to do with healthcare and schools and safety and things like that. Was this daunting when you were given this task? Was there any concern that this was a big subject for you?
No, not really, because I was delighted for the privilege to chair neighborhoods, to be the ears and the eyes for Mayor Robertson during this transitional period. As many may know, that Pensacola is nicknamed the City of Five Flags. It has other nicknames as well, such as the crater of naval aviation, the Western Gate to the Sunshine State, America First Settlement, the Emerald Coast, Red Snapper capital of the world, Pensacola, just to name a few. And it's made up of many different neighborhoods, and yet each neighborhood is unique. For example, Belmont DeVille is the home of the blues. The Tan Yard is the historic waterfront for African Americans and the Creole community. East Hill has a funky artist element about it, and North Hill is home to Southern style. And there are many other examples of how each neighborhood has its own identity. And yet, all the neighborhood, as I maneuver through the city, share the same challenges and concerns, such as public safety, health care, sidewalk, walkability, lighting, stormwater, noise reduction, and etc. And so I set out in the scope of my view to gather as much input I could to share with the mayor how that we can create a better place for all the citizens in Pensacola to raise family, to live, play, work, and worship.
So you attended quite a few neighborhood meetings and public meetings. Do you recall any special meetings or interesting things that stood out to you?
As the moderator for First West Florida Baptist District Association, something that stood out to me was a gentleman by the name of Julian McLean. He came to me in the neighborhood, and he wanted to invest in the Dixon School, and I thought that was interesting when business was partnering with community to transform a community, and I think that's going to be a model across the country when successful business partner with community and neighborhoods to provide a model education.
Well, that's interesting you bring that up because Innisfree Corporation's work in that neighborhood was in the local press, I think in the Pensacola News Journal here in the last couple of days. Give us a little background, Isaac, about the Dixon School and what the issues were that attracted the McQueen family to get involved over there.
The Dixon School of Arts and Science, it was former A.A. Dixon School of Arts and Science, and they've been in existence for about 10 years. They have been having challenges, but they survived, and they was over in another facility, Pastor May to be frankly, and they were basically outgrowing that facility, and they according to Mr. McQueen, him and Commissioner May was riding around one day, and he suggested that this could be a good place to invest. And so from that conversation, he met with Pastor May, and Pastor May contacted me, and the relationship began, and now it's coming to fruition.
Yeah, that's I thought that was an amazing story, and I know that the McQueen family probably likes to do their benevolent giving in a sort of a low-key kind of way. Yeah. But I think the community is better served when they understand how the private sector is getting involved in some of these neighborhoods. And so I thought that was one of the better news stories I'd heard. And that's interesting that during your transition report research, you had the chance to encounter the McQueen family and talk to them about possible opportunities in the neighborhoods. But getting into the meat of the report here, you mentioned that there were some common threads in your meetings and throughout the neighborhoods. One of them being safety and police presence. Tell me what the concerns are that you learned about.
I found it very interesting. Nearly every town hall meeting that I attended, a neighborhood, the community wanted more police presence and interaction with the police. They wanted the police and the community to work together, not as a reactive motive, but a preventive motive. And by partnering with their presence along and getting to know the citizen, they could best respond to a crisis. And I thought that was very interesting, that they wanted more police presence in the communities across the city.
Yeah, it sounds like the neighborhoods valued the police presence, and they wanted to get to know them so that it could be a common undertaking to ensure safety and safe neighborhoods out there rather than an adversarial relationship.
Yes.
So I thought that was very interesting. Walkability and connected streets was one of your observations. Tell us about that one.
I was in one neighborhood, I think it was Scenic Heights, and we discovered in that neighborhood that many of the children, in order to get to the school there in that neighborhood, there's no sidewalk. They had to ride their bicycles in the street, or they had to walk in the streets. And mornings when it's foggy and raining, when the visibility is low, it was a serious concern about safety of the children getting to school. And thus, if they could do connect streets and the students could walk on the street and walk in a safe environment, the parents and the community would really appreciate that.
80 Americans for Disability Act accessibility was another item that I saw in your report.
Yes, as I went through the community, you will find there are many streets that if you're in a wheelchair, if you have this disability, it just is not accessible. You can't go from one street to another without going alternate route that will put you at a disadvantage. And so I think it's very important that the city look at avenues and means of connecting the streets, especially for those who are ADA and who need ADA assistance.
Preparing our young people in the various neighborhoods for jobs of the future was another topic that you highlighted in here. What did you learn about that?
I discovered in my interaction with the community is that the Pensacolians, they want their young people to be able to go to school and then live here, acquire a decent job that will pay a salary that they can raise their family on, and that Pensacola can remain a home for decades to come. And I thought that was interesting, that if we were focused on the millennial and create an atmosphere where millennials would tell other millennials, this is where we want to call home, I think that Pensacola would really be an outstanding city.
Lack of minority leadership in key departments, you made note of. What do you want to say about that?
As I was going through the neighborhood, it led me back to City Hall, and as I went through City Hall, and I do want to give a shout out for the workers at the City Hall. The mayor is blessed with a tremendous staff of dedicated and faithful staff. But what I did notice, and as I pulled my reports and I took a look at City Hall, is that there's very few minorities in key leadership roles. I think it exists still today. That in the top level of leadership, out of the total workforce of about 700 and some people, I think there's only 4 or 5 people whose salary is in the top echelon. And I think that really need to be taken a look at, as well as given opportunity to promote to key roles. I think that the city ought to reflect the makeup of the city, and it'll make it conducive and a wonderful place for everybody, knowing that as I put in the report, that, and Mayor Robinson said to me on occasion when we were meeting, that he wants Pensacola to be a place where high tides will lift all ships. He doesn't want to discriminate against one for another, but he wants everybody, and I think that's wonderful as he create an opportunity and open doors for all of Pensacolians to ensure that they got a voice and a place and a space in the community.
The subject of gentrification, particularly in the West Side neighborhoods, you also noted in your report, and you called for the city doing more planning to address this. What are the gentrification concerns you're hearing?
The gentrification concerns that were brought to my attention was that as Pensacola is moving towards making Pensacola a vibrant place to live, there are industries that are coming in and building new homes and new industries that the indigenous people who are here, that as the value of the property value goes up, they're not able, especially the senior citizen, able to pay the taxes on their property, and thus they'll lose their property, they'll lose what's been in the family for years. And so I think it's important that as the mayor, that he has someone who will look in preserving historical homes and communities and business and look at ways that they could grandfather in ways so people can maintain these historical homes, communities.
Well, you collected quite a briefcase full of observations, and I think that's exactly what Mayor Robinson was looking for as you did sort of a deep dive in these neighborhoods. And then you put together, part of your task was to put together some recommendations. Isaac, so would you kind of run down, starting in no particular order, what you offered up as recommendations?
Thank you, John. One of the things that I thought was interesting is that during this transitional period, the mayor and I, we met with the president of Sacred Heart, and it was a wonderful meeting, and he shared with us that he wanted to partner with City Hall in finding ways that he can get into the neighborhoods and help on the health front. But he said something that kind of stuck in my mind, is that he had never been to City Hall but one time, and only reason he came down there was for a dispute, and he thought it was a wonderful experience for the city to want to partner with them. And so I think that what I really discovered is that the city wants to partner with the citizen want to partner with the city to make this a wonderful place. And if the mayor, his staff reach out, engage, and involve, I think they can make a transformative difference in the lives of the people here in Pensacola.
So I think in the report itself, the first recommendation you mentioned in here is to create a formal office or department that deals with neighborhoods. And as I read that, Reverend, the first thing I thought of is, does Reverend Williams really want us to have another layer of bureaucracy at City Hall? But then I started thinking about this, and when I read the report, what you were pointing out made a lot of sense. It was so many of these neighborhood functions are scattered throughout the various departments that having a single point of contact, if you will, would help citizens accomplish these things much quicker. Did I have that right? Is that a fair assessment?
I think you're point on. What I believe, and I recommend to the mayor, that if he would create this office, this department, that they will be directly responsible to the 81 different neighborhoods and their concerns and issues, and they would strategically implement a plan to help bring these some 70 neighborhoods back active into city government. And by bringing these these neighborhoods back, I think it will benefit everybody, because as the neighborhood grows and they are happy, the city will be happy. And so they need a point of contact for the ones that are defunct, who can help them organize. They can give them best practices and show them how to get their neighborhoods so they'll be safe. And so I think that's very important.
Yeah, you said something in your report that struck me. I'm a big proactive outreach kind of guy, but I noticed in your report that you said that such a department would have as its mission is to conduct outreach. Don't wait for the people to come, go to the people and explain to them how you add value to their neighborhoods. And the other part was to be proactive. Again, don't wait for them to come, but go out, and especially with these underserved neighborhoods. Elaborate a little more on that.
What I was trying to depict in that piece of the report was that the citizens want to know that the mayor, City Hall, is concerned about their needs, and when they feel that the mayor and the City Hall is concerned, especially for those who are underrepresented, it will make a spark difference in their attitude and their wanting to get involved. And I must say this, I know this a little off what you're asking me, but there's a lot of goodwill for Mayor Robertson, and if I could plug in a note for my wife said to me often while I was on this transition team, she said he actually cares. She's a discerner of a person. He cares about the people, and he's engaged. And so I think that would take him a long ways if these underrepresented community get to experience and see that he really cares and he's concerned about them. It'll go a long ways for him in developing these association neighborhoods.
You know, that's a big recommendation for any mayor, 81 neighborhood associations. But I will say, just watching Mayor Robinson's social media activities, he's everywhere, almost 24/7. And he's running up to Tallahassee, and he's going over to Triumph meetings out of town. It's impressive, him being out and about. But that's what being mayor is all about.
Yes.
And that's what it's all about. What were your other recommendations, Isaac?
I made another recommendation that we discovered in the neighborhoods that primarily in the low-income neighborhoods, that the community centers are closed on the weekend. And for those neighborhoods, transportation for them, for these individuals to go to other places is very limited, and it leaves these inner city children basically no place to go to or escape but to go to the streets. And I believe that if the mayor would look at open up these community centers in these neighborhoods to give these young people a place to play, I believe it can keep them out of trouble. It can be a place for them to have after school activity as well as playing. And then also, I want to plug this in, that this could be a place where the hospital can come and provide screening and stuff. And so they could use it for many other purposes to help bring about the need that's in that community.
Well, I think not having school-age children myself, it was kind of a surprise to me that the community association or the neighborhood community centers weren't open on the weekends, but I imagine a lot of citizens in those neighborhoods, it wasn't a surprise to them, was it?
No, and we do understand that there's budgetary constraints and restraints, and since there's on a limited amount of resources, but I believe that we could look at other avenues in order to generate that farm. If they create volunteers and different mechanisms that we can open up those facilities, I think it'll pay big dividends.
So it may be a financial issue, it may be an accountability issue. There's a number of things probably involved in that.
Yes.
And I know somebody was telling me recently the Sanders Beach Community Center does weddings over there, all sorts of community events, and other community centers they have after school programs. But the weekend part of this, as you note in your report, seems to be a fertile ground to be plowed. as we used to say back in the in my neighborhoods. So then you went on to notice that increasing police presence in neighborhoods was another recommendation. Now, did you have a chance to talk to the police department about some of your findings?
That was another bucket for another person on the transition team to deal with the police. So I didn't want to bleed into her area. But I have interacted in my own private capacity with the chief of police, and I think he'll do a wonderful job. And it'll be, I think, well served if the mayor would task him to look at a plan to implement more police presence in those neighborhoods that need it, moving resources around, because if you have this great relationship before a crisis happens, the citizen, I believe, will respond in a positive way to the police. And when you feel safe, you feel happy about your community.
That's interesting, Isaac. Connie Bookman, your fellow transition team member for police and public safety, will follow you here in the chair. I think it's Friday, this coming Friday,
yeah.
And she'll talk about her reports. So that ought to be interesting, because it's sort of what you saw and what you observed feeds right into the whole subject area of police and safety. Let's talk about basic stuff here: stormwater, street lights, sidewalks, speeding automobiles and motorcycles.
If there was a reoccurring theme in every neighborhood that I discovered, is that they want more lighting, more adequate lighting. They were concerned about flooding. Whenever it rains, the streets become impasse. They was concerned about speeding in the neighborhood, speeding down the streets, and so we believe that if they can put common device to slow the traffic down, lighting, things like that can certainly help and go a long ways in the community.
Again, I heard the mayor talking recently about stormwater issues right over here, right over here on Main Street, and you got to have a lot of sympathy for the mayor. He's got his hands full with a lot of things, and these problems didn't develop overnight, and they're likely not to get fixed overnight as well, but it certainly has his attention, and I would like to think that what you put in your report helped bring some focus into this as well. The interesting part about speeding in neighborhoods, on social media you see a lot of this. People, whatever close call they had with an automobile, whether it was them, their child, or their pet, immediately goes straight to social media, and it's an immediate demand for action. And if you multiply that out many times a day, you can see that people at their heart, in their neighborhoods, they want a place where they can have very little fear that their children or their pets or themselves will be harmed. And I know there's a lot of work going on in here, and you probably have seen that too. This whole business of safe streets and changing the way we maintain and design our streets, I know, are way up on the mayor's priority list, as are the county commissioners as well. So I guess the final part of these transition report tasks was to identify, how do you measure your progress? Was that a difficult task for you?
No, it wasn't. What I discovered in this juncture is that there's basically about three things that I think I call low-hanging fruit for the mayor. And one of the key things that stood out is that as I met with social leaders, business leaders, community leaders, they wanted access to the mayor. And so if he can have his schedule so that he can meet with these organizations, not just during election time, but periodically throughout the year, maybe through town hall meetings or whatever. He'd meet with them and just hear what's on their heart, and that let them know that he's still accessible. And I think that will go a long ways. But secondly, they have an organization called CNAP, the Council of Neighborhood Association Presidents of Pensacola. That's a wonderful community. That's a wonderful organization, and they deal with all the presidents here, and that is a resource that can really help solve a lot of the problems that's going on in the neighborhood. And so if the mayor has a representative that can go and be a part of that council, I think that would really be wonderful in helping him achieve his agenda.
You know, I've been in cities and governments before where groups like CNAP were actually given a seat at the table at the city council meeting as non-voting members, but they had a chair and they could participate in the deliberations.
I would certainly endorse that.
Yeah, I think that it always raises the visibility of that non-voting organization in there. But once you start down that road, then a lot of organizations are seeking the same type of status. And I know it's a delicate situation for city government, so we'll see how that works out in the future. But there was a lot of work done in your report, just getting around 81 organizations and community groups, particularly with the public-private piece. That's such a great news story, Sacred Heart and the Innisfree Hotels Corporation. So Isaac, I am impressed, and I'm sure the mayor and Mr. Studer and all the people involved on the team were impressed. So thank you from behalf of all the citizens who are watching here today.
Thank you for inviting me, Jim.
Now, I can't let you go this afternoon without one little, I want to go slightly off script as I like to do with these things, because I'm interested in our guests who are here.
Yes.
But I was going through your bio, and one thing caught my eye was that you did your graduate work at Morehouse College in Atlanta. Most of you know about Morehouse College. That's the historically black college. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King attended Morehouse College. And it was also in the news here this weekend when a Morehouse graduate, given the commencement address, announced to all the graduating students that he was going to pay for their student loans. And that has been created quite a buzz across the country.
Yes.
But the idea of Morehouse College, so I went in there and I looked and I said, well, I knew that Dr. King had gone to Morehouse, and then I was looking at a list of very prominent graduates at Morehouse, and I was just struck by what a tremendous organization that produces such tremendous leaders in the black community, now serving our entire nation. And I'm going to take a minute here to read off just a few of them. I got 5 pages, but there's a few of them that are household names in here. Besides the Dr. King, there was Maynard Jackson, who we all know, the airport over there in Atlanta. He was the first black mayor of Atlanta. There was Herman Cain, who ran for president last year. The New York Mets Hall of Famer and World Series Most Valuable Player Don McClendon, class of '56. The actor Samuel L. Jackson, the class of '72. Recent and former Secretary of Homeland Security Jay Johnson, class of '79. The publisher, one of the wealthy people in the black community nationally, Robert Johnson, who published Jet Magazine, class of '48. The movie filmmaker and president of his own company, Spike Lee, class of '79. Louis W. Sullivan, who many of you may remember as Department of Health and Human Services in the Carter president's cabinet and former director of the Morehouse School of Medicine. These are giants in the world of the black community and throughout America. Did you ever get the feeling when you're in the Morehouse, at Morehouse, that you were walking in the shoes of some very accomplished people? Did that ever strike you?
John, that's an interesting question, a wonderful question. When I got to ITC Morehouse, it's interesting because my experience in education thus far has been in one primary dominant of the white America. I went to Tallahassee Community College for my AA degree. I went to Florida State University for my Bachelor of Art in Psychology and Religion, and I went to New Orleans Baptist Seminary for my Master of Divinity. And when I did my doctoral studies there at ITC Morehouse, when I got there, I had this sense of belonging. It was just an overwhelming feeling that you standing in place of where such giants have traveled in. I think I will forever cherish that moment.
Yeah, and I think that has broader implications when we think about underserved and minority communities and their sense of belonging and communities in these neighborhoods. And I know that we had recently the Dixon School, as you talked about a little earlier, and how important that is to these neighborhoods. Even though when school districts and the guys with the green eye shades and the sleeve garters who've got the computers that have to figure out return on investment, sometimes I think, my opinion is, that this sense of community is lost on the cost accountants in the world. And I think we would be better served to remember the lessons, just as you mentioned how you felt connected, that this was something that was important to you as an African American minister. So I don't want to get too far off script here, but
could I give a
appreciate
shout
that.
out? Could I give a shout out for Robert Smith? I
Yes,
think
yes.
that was awesome for him.
This was the student loan payback.
Yes,
fella, yeah.
and he surprised everyone. And I hope that that's the beginning of a trend or a phenomenon that will spread across America, where those who are very successful will invest in the future of our young people, and then challenge them to pay it forward. And so my hat is off to Mr. Smith, and I trust that other folk will do the same thing.
The Reverend Dr. Isaac Williams has been our guest today, a member of the mayor's transition team. It's been delightful to have him in with us and telling all about the work he's done and other important lessons that I think we can all take away from our discussion today. So, Reverend, thank you for being with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me, sir.
I'm John Singley. I've been your host this afternoon, and whenever you may be watching this, it's live now, but it'll be up on Facebook for quite some time. So I hope you can spend some time with Reverend Williams and his discussion with us today. Thanks to all of you. Tomorrow we have the League of Women Voters will come in as we conclude our mini series on the Florida Legislature recap, and on Friday your transition team colleague Miss Connie Bookman from ARC Gateway Pathways for Change will be in to talk about her transition report. So on behalf of everybody with us today, Teresa Hill, who puts all this stuff together for us in such a tremendous fashion, thank you all for being with us, and have a great evening.